Good evening. You know, November, it's coming quickly, and well, it's fall of the year. Now is the time when you, well, want to get your sweaters and your jackets. And well, generally you go to Starbucks or your local neighborhood cafe, and you order the pumpkin spice latte and things of that nature. Apple cider, hot apple cider with donuts. That's the traditional fall traditions. College football, you know, sports. We all love sports. And then there's the holidays. Thanksgiving, apple pies, mincemeat pie, pumpkin pie. You have the turkey. Now, some of us will, we contact the 1-800 Butterball line because we don't know how to unthaw a turkey. It can be difficult. And then, well, you got to think about all the sides: mashed potatoes, green beans, coleslaw, macaroni and cheese, you know, spinach, just to name a few. And well, don't forget the dressing and the sweet potatoes. You can't forget the sweet potatoes. You know, there's so many traditions that we do in the fall. And well, last year, during this time, we were all, well, in our homes. And this year, we're still mostly all in our homes. But things have started to, well, reopen up a bit. And that's good. People need perspective to get out sometime. And well, one thing that's going to make this November a little bit different than last November is that, well, we're talking about something that Americans generally loathe talking about. And if you don't know what loathe is, it means a deep hatred of something. Americans loathe history. They don't like history. They don't like hearing about things that have already occurred. No, we like to think about the future. What will happen down the road? How will our kids and our children will do after us? That's what Americans like, well, hearing. And then, well, we also like hearing things in the past. Well, if it makes us feel good about ourselves, you know. We like hearing stories of, well, how the greatest generation liberated Germany from the Nazis. Those are historical tales that we enjoy hearing. Most of us anyway. Well, there's just a couple of issues though. We only tell the good part. And you know with anything, there's always a good and a bad. Well, the bad is really bad. Just like the good is really good. And well, that's kind of the issue. The issue of how it makes people feel. It makes people feel uncomfortable when they learn about things that have happened that are not so, well, nice and wholesome and clean and pretty. You know, it makes people feel really sad and upset. And well, all of those feelings that we have as, well, creatures on this planet, every feeling is valid when an individual has it. I don't want to dismiss people's feelings, but I do want to say this. When it's cloudy and dreary outside, and it's raining, really pouring down rain, I mean, you probably get sad, and well, you probably don't feel all that jolly enough to go running outside. You know, some people dance in the rain, but not a lot of people. You sort of kind of go inside and find things to do, you know, keep you preoccupied, you know, keep you from feeling too down in the dumps, so to speak. Because generally speaking, we all enjoy when the sun comes out. We can, well, wear less clothes. We can go outside and do more things. Socialize, you know. And feeling discomfort and uncomfortable now, well, it's become a thing in our society. And like I said, I don't seek to minimize anyone's feelings. However, I will say this. Uncomfortability is a spectrum. I mean, if I'm in prison, I'm certainly uncomfortable because I'm an inmate. I'm in a cell, a very tiny cell, with not a lot of amenities or things that I'm freely able to do. Now, if I'm in a school and I have a relatively good teacher and I'm being taught a subject about something that happened in the past, a long time ago, that I had no bearing or responsibility over, but still, people that, well, kind of resemble me, I'm being told did something really atrocious to other people that resemble other people in the classroom. Now, I would think that that probably would elicit a whole lot of emotions, not just feelings of discomfort, but multiple feelings. But well, as a society, some of us are choosing to only focus on, well, the possibility of one feeling over the other many feelings that someone could have. You know, you can have multiple feelings simultaneously at one time. But we're very kind of binary in that kind of thinking thus far, especially in terms of this conversation. So let's get to the nitty-gritty of it. Critical race theory. You've probably heard it referred to as CRT all across America. Parents are going to school board meetings, protesting, demanding that their school remove any critical race theory curriculum. Now, I made a video a while back stating that I supported teaching critical race theory in K-12 schools. However, in K-12 schools, at least in the public and private schools across America, critical race theory has not ever been taught, nor, well, was it planned to be taught. You know, you can support something without actually implementing something. And that's what the schools have, well, made a consensus choice to do. Now these parents who are protesting, they're saying they don't want critical race theory taught in K-12 schools. And the schools are saying we don't teach it. So I'm thinking here critically, assessing this situation. If the schools are saying they don't teach it, and the parents are demanding that it not be taught, then well, there's some kind of misunderstanding, mix-up, miscommunication, so to speak. But maybe there's not. Maybe we're talking about the same thing, but using different lexicons or verbiage to refer to it. You know, we first have to understand what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is a legal doctrine. Came out in the 1970s in, well, university level course. It pretty much made mention of, well, systemic racism, systemic systems of oppression that's marginalized communities of color, predominantly the Black and African American community in America. And basically, what was stated was that these things are consciously and unconsciously done by individuals who operate our system. Now, let's pause and reflect on the previous 4 years in America and see, I think we can all agree, or most of us who aren't part of, well, Code 45 can agree that, well, there were plenty of systems in place oppressing, well, minorities and people of color, all across America the past 4 years under the previous administration. Now, his code will say that's not true. You're making that up. You have no evidence to support that. Of course I do. Look at all the stories that have been coming out that are being popularized on your local and national news. The gentleman who was playing monkey noises to his African American neighbors had been doing that for the past 5 years. Long enough, well, to encompass the whole Trump administration. And then you have other things happening that have been happening for, well, years and years and years, but now finally being exposed and, well, hopefully being addressed and dealt with. You see, Code 45 didn't just start in 2016. For that, you have to go all the way back to, well, the foundation of the country. Not just after Barack Obama got elected. That's when things got, well, real hot real quick. But, well, you have to go back to the foundation of the country. You know, the very beginning, where they said we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these were life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, all men weren't created equal. We know that they didn't believe that because, well, most of the individuals who authored that held slaves. And at that time, the slaves were not considered human. They were considered 3/5 of a human being. Subhuman, animals, savages, unclean, ungodly. You know, that's what they were considered. So, they weren't part of the old men that they were referring to. And then, well, we just sort of kind of commodified women. I mean, we did have women back in that time period. It said all men are created equal. It made no mention of women. So, all of these conservative women, if you really want to follow the original intent of the Constitution, you wouldn't be a United States Congresswoman or a United States Senator or in any legislative body or in any judicial body, you know, because back then women were considered property of men. They had no rights. No race of women had any rights. But, well, if you were a slave, a black woman, well, not only were you property of your slave master, but whatever violation or sick whim that would come to that individual's mind, they would definitely perform because they didn't see black women as being human. You know, we have to talk about inconvenient truths, things that are uncomfortable that we progress and move on from in our society. We don't believe in the Stone Age, but we sort of kind of still have Stone Age practices that we continue to do. Because, well, while we try to move on from the past, we haven't done, well, reconciliation and repair of, well, the past to lead us into a better present and future. And that's what this is about. You see, critical race theory was an extension of teachings by Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, Sojourner Truth, and a lot of other, well, civil rights icons of that time period who were advocating for the abolition of slavery to then the administration of Abraham Lincoln. You know, people had to advocate. They were activists back then. People had to, well, write newsletters and pen telegrams. They actually used the quill pen back then. They had to do all of the things that we do in different ways and modalities now. But it existed back then. Slavery just didn't end because, well, somebody got the right idea one day to say, you know, human beings shouldn't enslave other human beings. No, there was a whole war fought where multiple states in our union decided to separate and secede from the larger country and fight to, maintain the institution of slavery because, it was profitable to those states. The commodification of human bodies for, consumption of free labor. It's an empirical truth. However uncomfortable, the listener might feel, it can be validated in multiple ways. So, this whole debate about, whether we should share or tell the truth, because, comfortability might be something that we might have to tiptoe over. I don't know what we should think about it. I don't know if that's, the path we should go down. Because, that too is an uncomfortable path to go down. Because if you don't, share the accuracy of things that have occurred, things that occur in the present, then, what truths or things that are universal to all of us should be shared? I mean, if you don't end up sharing the truth, you end up getting teachers like Candace Reed. Now, perhaps you've seen the video all over social media of Candace Reed doing, disrespectful and very grotesque interpretation of what she believed Native Indians and Native Americans and First Nation and Indigenous people chose to behave as. It's not even remotely true. But the reason an individual can, do things like that is based solely out of ignorance, not knowing, and, miseducation. Growing up, I watched a lot of, cowboy and Indian movies, as they used to refer to it back then. And, the cowboys were always the good guys. And the Indians, they were always the bad people. They were portrayed as, less than human, savages, something that needed to be, shot with a gun. And that's why you had a whole generation of boys who wanted guns and bows and arrows so they could play cowboys and Indians and run around shooting Indians or pretending to shoot the people that they dressed up to be Indians. Now, people say video games create gun violence. What do you think the psychological impact of little boys running around, pretending to shoot other little boys did to the American society? It created a culture of, toxic masculinity, rampant gun violence, something that, there also hasn't been addressed in our society. Because, we don't do deep dives into the root causes of issues that we have as, people on our planet. Critical race theory. It's a critical theory to analyze social and, legal and economic issues in our country. We all know that those things exist. And people going to school board meetings just shouted that they don't want critical race theory taught. Well, I have some good news for you. It's not being taught in any K-12 public or private school. There was never any intention of teaching critical race theory. But, I don't know what is being taught now. Certainly not critical race theory. But I don't think any American history can be taught. I mean, you've got multiple states now across America who have banned the teaching of critical race theory. But they sort of kind of very much broaden that out to mean, anything that involves race. And, I don't know how you teach because, the whole country's foundation, the pillars of the United States, were founded on, it being a racist nation, a colonizer settlement. A lot of people like to say that the original sin of America was slavery. That's factually incorrect. The original sin of the United States of America was colonizing the indigenous people's land. The genocide of 55 million indigenous people through wars, diseases, sickness and, well, starvation, through, well, boarding schools that tortured kids, really did torture kids. I mean, they're finding the bones in, well, the backyards of the schools. You know, that really did happen. It's hard to come to terms with, well, the depravity and the atrocities that were committed. Granted, I understand that. But not when wanting to even acknowledge that things happen really does a disservice to other people and their comfortability in the classroom. You know, now you probably won't be able to teach about, well, the whole civil rights movement. How could you? You would have to talk about, well, segregation and, well, who was for and who was against it. You'd have to talk about Strom Thurmond and how he held the longest, still the longest standing filibuster in United States history for the 1957 Civil Rights Act. You would have to discuss, Bill, that John Lewis, who, well, transitioned last year, well, he advocated for desegregation, and, well, he had his head beaten by a sheriff on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. You wouldn't be able to talk about that. No, maybe you can discuss Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech. I think that's safe. That doesn't make anybody feel uncomfortable. But, well, what were actually the contents in there? The contents of the I Have a Dream thing, you know, the thing that everybody quotes about judging people by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. You know, that's all fine and dandy, and I think we can still teach that. But we'd have to teach that, well, he was incarcerated, and we'd have to teach that he wrote letters from a Birmingham jail. No, we can't talk about that. I don't even think we can talk about, well, that Martin Luther King was assassinated, and there were multiple riots that ensued across America. Far worse than, well, what happened in 2020 with George Floyd. We couldn't talk about those riots because, well, that might actually be critical race theory. Who knows? Nobody knows. The way these state legislators crafted the bills in Texas, you look now, you have principals being fired for, well, you know, just even talking about the civil rights movement. You have teachers being, well, terminated for having books in their classrooms. You have whole books being banned, words not being able to be used in Wisconsin. You know, for the party, the political party that says they're for limited government, and now is intruding in your local teacher's classroom, in your local teacher's, well, school board meetings. It doesn't seem like you're too much for limited government. It seems like you're for, well, limited truth, limited honesty, limited, well, accountability. That's where it seems like you're really for limited. You know, critical race theory. People don't even know what it is or who invented it, but yet they're opposed to it. Why? Because they're scared of the idea. They're terrified that, well, that finally the truth will actually be told. It has nothing to do with comfortability of children. No, children are comfortable learning the truth. Every child now has a smartphone. You know, they don't have to take the Purple People's House word for anything. They don't have to take their local Congress members' word for anything. They don't even have to take the President of the United States' word for anything. They can just do a simple Google search, and, well, they'll discover the truth. You know, we don't live in the Stone Age anymore. There are some empirical truths. Slavery did happen in America to, well, African and black people. And, well, we do live in a system of gross income inequality And we live in a system that, well, has been so gentrified and redlined to exclude, well, mostly black people from gaining any type of financial or economic wealth in this country. Those are all, well, remnants, tentacles of slavery that we never addressed. But now we don't want to, well, even in part that those things even occurred. So how can you address a sickness or a symptom if you don't even want to acknowledge that, well, you're actually sick? You can't. And that's where we are in America. Millions of Americans don't want to, well, address the issue, which is that, well, racism exists in our society. It always has since the foundation of our country. In fact, it's the pillar of our country. Millions of Americans don't want to admit that because, well, to admit it would mean that, well, reforms and changes would be necessary and needed to correct an imbalance. So, well, we'll go to school board meetings and shout down teachers, threaten school board members. But, well, what we won't do is actually, well, seek to re-educate ourselves. And, well, when you say re-educate, that sounds all weird. It sounds like you didn't get a proper education. So instead of saying re-educate, maybe we should say, well, seek to get a proper education. Because you can't discover a land, you can't discover a land mass where people already reside and live. You have millions of people thinking that Christopher Columbus discovered America. How? When people already were living on the continent. People were taught something that wasn't true. And, well, they want the next generation to be taught something that isn't true. They just don't want them to be taught anything. They want them, well, to be left alone. And the problem with that is we have to have a public education because the public has to be informed of certain things. You can't keep information from the public now anyway. You have the internet. And, well, it's the most powerful educational tool in existence to humanity that's ever been invented. So this whole notion of banning a book in a physical classroom, you do know you can download a digital book on Kindle. Unless the laws are specifically written that, well, you can't use a digital copy of the book, then I would just use a digital copy and, well, use a PowerPoint. There. I don't have the physical copy, but the words are still there in essence. You can't get around inconvenient truths. You can avoid them. You can, well, try to pretend that they don't exist. You can make up all kinds of wild aspersions about them. But you can't avoid an inconvenient truth. Things that are empirical, that are factual. Well, things like 1 + 1 = 2. And that, well, the longer you live, well, at some point you will be deceased. Those things are empirical truths that you can't avoid. And another empirical truth that you can't avoid is things that have already occurred. All of us grew up hearing and learning there's no sense in crying over spilled milk. And that's true. It's already been spilled. So, for these conservatives, there's no sense in crying over spilled milk. 1619, the year 1619, already happened. Slavery already occurred. So, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. But what you can do for the younger generation is give them a chance to be better than the generation in 1619. A chance for them to learn, heal, grow, amend, and seek restitution. That's what we could all do going forward. Do better than what we did previously. You want to do better than you did yesterday. You don't want to do the same thing you did yesterday, today. Not the exact same thing. Not the exact same way. You might have liked eating pizza yesterday. But, well, You probably want to eat pizza again, maybe the leftovers. But you probably don't want to order the exact same pizza at the exact same time that you did yesterday. That would be odd and weird. But when it comes to, well, learning about things or changing, that's how people's minds work. A lot of people. That's sad. You know, November is coming. We all know November is coming. Now, what that means is winter is around the corner. A lot of people dread winter happening. It's uncomfortable. You gotta go outside and shovel snow. If you live in Chicago, you gotta put something in your parking spot to protect your parking spot. Because you might have shoveled snow for like 3 or 4 hours. And then somebody will just come along and go move your furniture piece and park in your space. That leads to a lot of hostility. It's uncomfortable to do certain things when winter happens. You might have to go outside and start your car up early before you head into work or school or wherever you're going. Well, we do those things. Even though they're uncomfortable, we do them. They cause us discomfort. We don't gain any joy by doing them. But they're necessary. They serve a purpose. And that's what history is. It serves its purpose. It's a reminder. It's a benchmark in time. It tells us about things that have previously happened, in the hopes that we don't repeat the bad things and that the good things get amplified again. And you know, you can't avoid the most inconvenient parts of history, which are the bad parts, and only teach the good parts. Because then kids will think that those things never happened. You'll have kids like Ian Cranston in Bend, Oregon, who, well, just recently murdered a young African American man for, well, complimenting his girlfriend. Now, Ian Cranston probably doesn't know this, but, well, that's why Emmett Till, years and years ago, was murdered. Apparently, a group of white people thought that he whistled at a white girl. And, well, he was brutally murdered and then mutilated. That's kind of what Ian Cranston did just this year. But Ian Cranston doesn't know about, well, Emmett Till. Probably never learned about Emmett Till in school. So, the old saying is true. Those who don't learn and know their history, they're doomed to repeat it. And I'm starting to think that there might be some fascist conservatives who are making a willful effort to not teach correct and proper history. So we do repeat some of the more dark, atrocious, and, well, evil parts of our history towards people again. Because sadly enough, some people are still tribal. Really, really tribal. And, well, they think that they should be the only people that, well, have voice and have rights to govern over other people and, well, put other people in bondage. Those things have happened before. We've been there. We've done that. You don't want to go back. You want to go forward. And change is necessary. And the only way you change is by knowing what's happened, so you can inform the present to make a better future. And we've got to do that with our youth. You know, we shouldn't be banning books. That's what the Nazis did in Germany. They banned books. And then they put books on a burn list. They gathered books together. And then they burned them. The Egyptians did that too. They gathered books. They banned them. And then they burned them. You know, fundamentalist religious organizations and cults, they did that too when they took over a new, well, community or village. They would take all the historical elements of that culture and, well, ban them, and then try to destroy them, desecrate them, burn them. Why? Because they didn't want people to know, well, what had previously been done. Their culture, their history, their identity. You know, people have a right to know the truth, no matter How many groups or people or demagogues or fascists or racists are inconvenienced by that?